Hello, welcome back to the Cricket Draft Show, where we are cruising and rattling towards game week 6 of the Big Bash. If you're new around here, consider subscribing to the channel. Drop us a like on the video, and if you've got any questions or comments that you'd like to drop in the comments, feel free to do so. We'll get back to you. My name is Dan Jadzevics. I'm your host. I'm joined by our analyst, Dan Weston, today. Dan, how are you? How's France?
Yeah, no, things are good, mate. Bit of a meh week so far with game week 5, so an uninspiring week for my team so far. But apart from that, doing pretty well.
Good news, good news. Well, I mean, I've had a slightly better week than uninspiring. I could definitely have done with a couple of Sydney Sixers playing, couldn't I, over in Australia? But apparently it rains over there. Who knew? Who knew? But look, there's different ways that you can consume information about the cricket draft. This being one of them. There's shorts and TikToks available too. There's also game week preview articles, which will be updated constantly for each week when more information becomes available. So it's definitely worth checking those out. And you can find links to those on all of the social media accounts for the cricket draft. We're getting into a bit of a confusing time with the Big Bash, and there's different franchise tournaments popping up around the world, and they're all competing for the same players. So we've got a little bit of an update for player availability for you going in ahead of game week 6 and the weeks beyond that, with the ILT20 starting relatively soon, whichever or wherever that tournament is in the world. We're going to run through the different teams. We're going to just have a quick blast through the overseas players. They're going to be the ones that are going to be affected the most. But we're going to start with the Sydney Thunder. We've got Lockie Ferguson, Shafane Rutherford, who we believe will be leaving on the 9th of January. So will be available for game week 6. Sam Billings is expected to be available throughout. The Hobart Hurricanes will have Waqar Salamkheil, Shai Hope, both leaving on the 9th of January. Chris Jordan to be available throughout. Sydney Sixers, James Vint, Akil Hussain leave on January the 10th. Jaffa Chauhan is still available, yet to play for the Sydney Sixers, despite all of our hype and excitement for him in the Big Bash this year. Brisbane Heat, Tom Banton is now out of games. Monroe, Alsop and Walter will be expected to be available throughout the tournament. Adelaide, Jamie Overton will disappear off England duty on game week 9. Ollie Pope will be available throughout the tournament. The Melbourne Stars, Ben Duckett to leave before game week 9 for the England series. Dan Lawrence is yet to be confirmed. I suspect that might be a conversation with regards to Duckett's availability / Tom Curran's injury. Osama Mir to leave on game week 7. Melbourne Renegades, Jacob Bethel head off to England duty on game week 9. Laurie Evans, Hassan Khan, we're still waiting for confirmation as to their availability, and Tim Seifert to be available throughout the competition. Perth Scorchers, and if you're a Perth fan or if you've got a lot of Perth players in your team, good news is that they are expected to be available, all of them, throughout the competition. Right. I'll take a little bit of a breather, Dan. If we gone through those players, there's obviously some big changes. Undoubtedly, with a tournament of this size, there potentially will be some overseas replacements coming in as well. But the good news is that teams get 4 free transfers going into the next game week. Have you had any time to think and prep as to how you're going to use those 4 free transfers? Is 4 going to be enough? That's going to be another question. There could be penalty transfers used here if people have gone too heavy on some of those players that might be disappearing.
Well, that's a great point, Dan. I think that I might be able to swerve the penalty transfers, but it's close. I have Vince and Banton in my team currently, so they're going to definitely have to go. Hats off to the designers of the game, actually, because this is the perfect point to introduce the increasing free transfers to 4. And I'm going to need them because I've got 1 player from Thunder and no players from Hurricanes who have the double game week in week 6. So I've got to really bring in 4 players from those 2 teams probably. And maybe I'm not massively in favour of a penalty transfer unless I know that I haven't got 11 players. But it might be a consideration. I don't think so, but it might be a consideration. As far as general strategy is concerned and advice for people playing the game, I think if you don't need to use all of those transfers to improve your starting 11, it's a question of finding the balance between ensuring the best options in that starting 11, but then trying to improve bench strength if you can as well. I'm conscious of potentially needing to use my 12th man googly at some stage, and at the moment I'm not in a position to do that. So I'm going to be focusing on that. Maybe not this week, but I know that it's in the back of my mind. That's something I'm going to have to look at.
Yeah, have you got players in your mind that you've got lined up to come in and replace some of these guys that you're going to be removing from your team, or are you? Actually, no, I'm not even going to allow you to keep your cards close to your chest. Just give us some names, Dan.
Okay, so it's important to realise when you're looking at the overall points per player list, that most teams who have got double game weeks in week 6, Thunder and Hurricanes, Thunder have played kind of, at the moment, 4.5 games at the time that we're recording this, which is the innings break in their game against Perth Scorchers. Hurricanes have only played 4 completed games, so it's not likely that we're going to see a lot of their players at the top of the point scoring charts. So this is where maybe points per game is more of an accurate measure of the quality of these players. Obviously, I have expected performance models as well. So a few players that might be of interest to people, or on my shortlist anyway. Sam Billings, who I know well from my time at Kent. 7.5 million, owned by 26% of teams though. So that's an interesting one. And you've got him as well.
I'm one of them.
Oh, he'll probably be texting me if he hears this, saying he's disappointed. He's not in my team already. But yeah, 362 points at this point in time in the tournament as well. So pretty good return from him so far. His teammates, looking at Thunder players, I think Wes Agar is also another player I know well from my time at Kent. 6.9 million, 15.5% of teams currently owning him. So only 1 in 7 teams pretty much own Wes right now. So that's a nice differential potentially as well. He's got just a shade under 300 points when I checked before we recorded this. And then a few Hurricanes players who might be of interest. We've got Mitch Owen of 4.7 million now. He's opening the batting and he's got 357 points and is a great budget enabler at that price for sure. A double game week, he looks like a really interesting proposition for especially when I'm missing out on batters as well in my squad. So he might enable me to be a bit more extravagant in some other areas in terms of splashing the cash and reinforcements. Riley Meredith, 7.4 million, owned by just 6% of players right now in this game. So he's a great differential option. He's got over 300 points from 4 games. So that's a nice option for him. And I wonder whether these percentages will change markedly given the fact that Hurricanes are not a popular team right now, given the fact that they didn't have game weeks over recent times, and now they've got the double game week. It might change. But Nikhil Chowdhury is only owned by 3.8% of teams in this game, at 6.7 million, 205 points in 4 games, and obviously able to contribute with both bat and ball as well. And then finally, potentially as a captain for game week 6, I might pick Chris Jordan, who's at 7.9 million, 8.8% of teams owning Chris Jordan right now. But he's got 256 points, which works out at 64 points per game, which is not bad. Actually, it's very similar in line with my model, shade over my model expectations. So even though maybe he's gone to the radar so far in this tournament, Chris Jordan is a player who I think could well be an astute purchase and potentially captain option for game week 6.
Point you made about the Hurricanes is a really good one. It's to the point that actually you've kind of forgotten that they even are part of the Big Bash this year, because they just haven't really played at all, have they? And they do go into game week 6, them and the Thunder, with a double game week as well, which undoubtedly will make those both sets of players more attractive than potentially others. Both have got serious kind of qualification aspirations as well, so there could be kind of long-term investment picks too, which is exciting. It's an interesting kind of just time of the game, isn't it, really, with the players leaving and then the 4 free transfers to be added in. And obviously you've then still got the ability to take those penalty transfers too. If you use your penalty transfers on some Thunder or some Hurricanes players, you could get a double kind of bite at a cherry here to pick those points back up, which is exciting. Could be one of the last chances to have a real big overhaul of your squad if things haven't really worked for you in the tournament so far. And I feel I could be sliding in towards that category where maybe the more aggressive tactic and the team management could be the better option for me. But With regards to players leaving, I mean, I've got James Vince. He's on his way. Tanvir Sangha has been injured for the last couple of weeks. He's a low percentage pick player, but actually at about 7.1 million, he's quite an expensive pick to have in that team, which unfortunately the best form of ability is normally availability. Jamie Overton, I've got a couple of weeks to play around with, but again, he's 7.6 million. He's quite a big chunk of budget. And then I really do need to spend some time sorting my bench out as well. So I've got Marcus Bean on there for about 4 million that probably does need the chop to bring in somebody that I might be able to kind of build up a squad of 13 players rather than play, which this week I think I'm going to play with 9 after that Sixers game has been washed out. So doesn't make the game any easier, does it?
Yeah. Not ideal, is it?
Not particularly, but apparently it can rain in Australia. So I was looking at a couple of players, and Ashton Agar would be one over at the Perth Scorchers. I know he's not got the double game week this week, but he's picked up, I think, over 300 points. There was a bit of an injury concern with him at the start. I don't believe he's playing today either against the Thunder. He's 6.9 million. Obviously, bats and bowls, less so of the batting nowadays, I think, but can come in and whack a few, as I saw at Northants last summer, which is exciting. Another Scorchers player, Jai Richardson, 7.3 million, pretty low owned as well. And both of those players in that Scorchers team should have goals and aspirations to go pretty deep into this tournament, although I don't know whether they've got double game weeks left or not, or whether it goes to a bit of normality. That's my own housekeeping. 5.2 million for Nick Hobson. I think we spoke about him last week, is a bit of a bargain. Again, long-term aspirations into the tournament. And the other guy as well, and I'll need to double check as to when the Thunder actually play their games in this next game week, in game week 6. But obviously there is a young man called Sam Constas at the moment who's upsetting various Indian cricketers around Australia. 4.8 million. I don't know whether he's still going to be part of that test squad before the time the Thunder play again in the next week. But 4.8 million for him to go back at the top of the order, which undoubtedly he will, is an absolute steal. And if the timing's right for it, that could be a real kind of stunning pick to add into the team. But that's kind of where I am. I really, really like your shout about Chris Jordan. I think he's a fantastic cricketer. And as you said, he's only played 4 games and he's got a massive amount of points already. But kind of where I am. And I'm very tempted to use more than the 4 free transfers as well.
Yeah, no, I can definitely sympathise with that. I'm going to try not to, but we'll see.
Any googlies for you this week as well? Are you thinking about double captaining? It's a perfect opportunity. Double game week, Thunder and Hurricanes.
It could be a double game week. Chris Jordan to double captain with maybe Chris Green. Yeah, I reckon that might not be a bad opportunity. You know, you've tempted me there, Dan.
Hey, that's what I'm here for. That is what I'm here for. Okay, right. So there was just one last thing we want to talk about just before we go, and obviously the weather is something that us British people have got a real kind of ability to talk about, because all it does here is rain through the summer when we're meant to be playing cricket. And today we've had a washout in the Big Bash between the Sixers and the Heat, wasn't it? Up in was it Coffs Harbour? I think they were meant to be playing. How big of an impact can that have when it comes to predicting these teams? Clearly, you and I have been punished here. We've lost 2 and 3 players out of our teams. But you can't really do a great deal about it, can you? Or can you?
I don't think we can. I mean, I've obviously lost Banton, Vince, and Dorcius from the rain off today. So certainly not ideal. Dorcius and Vince in particular have really done well for me over the course of this game so far. So that's a huge blow. But how do we kind of look to factor that into our calculations? It's so tough because before the tournament starts, obviously I built a model which had an expected points aspect to it, and obviously before the tournament I cannot predict that it's going to rain for this game in game week 5. I think it's hard enough to ensure that you're maximising your transfers and the input from your transfers each week without factoring in the weather. How you would do it in terms of an expected points, maybe. I would just literally think out loud, if you had an idea of how many points it was expected for each player in each game, and then you looked at your iPhone and you said 50% rain in this game or something like that, you might say, okay, well I'll multiply the 50% by their expected points. So you're expecting a player to get 50 points, then you might want to look at him as a 25-point player if there's 50% chance of rain on whilst the game is being played. That kind of thing. But I think you're going to have to, when you've got 2 transfers, I think it's really tricky. When you've got 4, maybe you can think about it a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I think it's something that you and I, one thing that I think we've both been guilty of is not paying attention to the bench, and something that our usual co-host Chris Dixon would have told us about before this game had started. And if we'd had a full bench of players, we might have got away with it. But look, there we go. Thank you so much for watching again this week. Good luck with your transfers and building your squad for the remainder of the competition. Let us know what substitutions you are going to make, what transfers you're making as well. And we'll see you next week when the 3 of us will have kind of pretty new look sides, I would have thought, going into the next couple of game weeks. So see you then.